and welcome to the June 17th, 2020 edition of the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. I'm your host, Kenneth L. Johnson, president of East Coast Executives, a Harlem, New York-based diversity recruitment firm. Today's topic is leveling up with featured guests Robert Barea and Uwe Coles, here to share their career journey and to answer your questions. You may be wondering how we got here today. These two people, this conversation, this format, and this topic, leveling up. Get to the next level in your career and plan your next promotion while working remotely. Typically, if you've been on the platform, we have one featured guest, but for this conversation, the NUL team of Wanda Jackson, Theveline Felix, and myself agreed that the conversation could support two amazing individuals, and these were the two we selected. This is simply an extension of a conversation that I've shared with these two over the years independently, and one that many of you know all too well. Meet Rob Barea, a kid from Harlem who wasn't supposed to make it according to the data. Meet Uwe Coles, an immigrant from Panama who arrived to the United States at 18 and would need everything to go right to be successful. You, a survivor of COVID-19 pandemic, racial injustice, looking to advance in your career in what will be now known as the new normal, remote work. It's all the same. It takes unique qualities and skill sets to navigate the corporate landscape, and Rob Barea and Uwe Coles have proven to be equal to the task. Thank you all for joining the UL Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series today. This is a Q&A themed edition, and we'll expect our audience to be gracious and welcoming as usual by being active in the chat and intentional in the Q&A. Thank you all for joining us. Rob Barea, what's going on, man? How's everything today?
Everything is everything. I'm just glad to be part of this this panel. I'm glad to share my story, but also hopefully whatever I share today will help at least one individual reframe their career path. So, just great to be here.
Man, I definitely appreciate it. I know this is what you do. You help people. You came to Harlem for mock interview workshops. You came back home, did mock interview workshops with me to help career seekers. So I know you'll be really helpful on this platform. Thank you for joining us today. Uwe Coles, how's it going?
It's going well.
I love it. I love it. It's always going well for you. Every time I see you, you have a big smile on your face. You're doing amazing things. It's my understanding from the people at Widener. Listen, and thinking about this conversation, I just kind of thought about some things that you've actually even brought me into. You've been welcoming from a career standpoint. I've been on and in conversations that involved you, that you've led to support students and kind of framing their education to advance their careers, right? And you've invited me to a platform to basically let me tell people how to eliminate my job out in Philly before. So I was really excited when you agreed to be on today. If you don't mind, Uwe, do me a favor. Just kind of walk our audience through your unique career journey.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. I'm thrilled. If there was a time to come home to each other, it's now. So I'm really thrilled to be in this moment with all of you today. As you mentioned, born and raised in the Republic of Panama, so identify as an Afro-Latina Black woman who happened to be born in the Republic of Panama. And I came to the United States for college at 18 years old. And at the time, my country was in the midst of political unrest, which feels a lot like where we are today. So this moment feels familiar. And so what's good about that is I'm here, right? So I've overcome a few things, and so will we. We have the fortitude to do that. For me, career has been a bit of a journey, not a straight line, but one that's had peaks and valleys. And I think that's usually the case for most of us. After college, I started my first job. I thought, based on my grades and the great experience that I had at an HBCU, Claflin University in South Carolina, that I would come into the workplace and just lead, manage, break through, right? And instead, I ran into a couple of walls, and some of them had to do with just being an early careerist and needing to take time to learn, to read the environment. And then others over time had to do with my identity, who I am and who I was then. And part of what I had to figure out was how to navigate the world of business while cloaked in beautiful Black skin, right? Which is whomever we might be and however that might show up. But over time, I have to tell you, between mentors, many of whom looked like me, and quite a few who did not, right? Who came from varied experiences, who saw something in me, much like what I think we will likely see in the people who've joined us today. People planted seeds, right? And really took time to help me learn and grow. So I have been working for well over 25 years in both for-profit and nonprofit. I think my work sits at the intersection of workforce development, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and education. Today, I am the Associate Vice President of Civic and Global Engagement for Widener University. It's a long title, but what it really means is I really get to work with people who look different and feel different and are different, and figure out how to build bridges of connection, bridges that help us move work forward. So that's me. It's been a journey, and hopefully what I've learned from it, I may be able to share with everyone who's with us today.
Man, that's great. Thank you so very much. Rob, speaking of journeys, listen, when we were on the prep call, you informed us that you started this journey at 14.
Yes, so, you shared a name that I haven't heard in a while, so I'm looking forward to connecting with an old friend. But I've been in the workforce and in the HR field since I was 14 years old. I started out at a small temporary agency in Midtown New York. And from there, when I graduated high school, I took a year after high school. I thought I was going to college, but I went to the military instead. And I spent 24 and a half years, and I retired in 2016 as a Chief Warrant Officer. Great career, went to great places, been to some places that aren't so great, but definitely no regrets in my choice of serving this country. But while I was in, especially toward the latter half of my career, really had to think, strategically of what I wanted to do. I did not want to stay till I died in the military, so to speak, stay till I got old, because as a warrant officer, you couldn't stay till you're 60 years old, and that was not the plan that I had. But while I was in, got my bachelor's degree, my graduate degree, got some certifications like the PMP, Project Management Professional, as well as Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. So I wanted to be able to be very marketable when I made that transition into the civilian space. But even with all of those, those letters I could put behind my name, I really didn't have a clue as to what I was actually going to physically do. I knew I didn't want to be in sales. I knew I wanted to have a role that, meant something to me. And I wanted to leverage all of the leadership skills that I had acquired while in the military. And the first, and then funny enough, when I was doing my job search, I thought that, senior military officer, a bunch of letters behind the back of my name, I should be picked up quite easily. Well, that's not the case at all, right? So yes, it's important to have the credentials, but it's more important to have a game plan. And after the third or fourth application, I said I didn't get any response, no hits. I kind of retreated back, spoke to my network, similar to Uber, talked to my mentors, what am I doing wrong? Figured out what the algorithm was and tried to beat that algorithm to get the first base, so to speak. And then I had a few offers that, I didn't realize how, challenging it was to get those offers, but I had some offers from pretty reputable firms that, was a testament to what I could bring to the table. Finally ended up selecting a role with a Fortune 500 company, again, not really understanding what I would specifically do, but knew that I had some value, had some skill sets that I can actually use and leverage in there. And while I was in that particular firm, I got exposed to some of the experiences I had as far as diversity and inclusion. So I worked with the business resource group with that particular firm. And by just, putting my best foot forward, failure not an option, never say die mentality that I was trained with in the military, I applied that to my work, and I got a tap on the shoulder, so to speak, saying, hey, great work that you're doing in one of our, subsidiary firms. Would you mind coming up to corporate and doing the same thing? So that was that move. But again, understanding that the skill sets that I bring, that the value that I bring, and more importantly, the depth of what I wanted to achieve, I started to look outward, and a couple of different opportunities came across my LinkedIn, so to speak. And then I decided to move to where I am now, which is KPMG, where I'm a director on the National Inclusion Diversity team, where I'm making a difference. I'm making an impact every day changing the hearts and minds of our colleagues to ensure that we have an inclusive environment, especially in these days. So my last few weeks have been, I've been operating at the highest levels. We are tired, but it's not about being comfortable right now. It's about making sure that the important work is done. I'm just glad to be a part of an organization that gets it, but more importantly, I'm glad that I'm able to use my skill set in a passionate way so that I can make a difference, not only for our colleagues within the organization, but hopefully they go back to their communities and apply the same principles. So that's my quick and dirty story, but I would tell you it's been such a great journey. I would not trade anything for it, my experiences, but I do have growth to do. So even though I had made some sort of a success, there's plenty more on my plate to do further.
I love it. You know what, Rob, I'm going to stay with you for a second, but Uwe, I'm going to ask this question of you as well. So Rob, you mentioned having letters behind your name. You have the PMP certification, right? You have some other certifications. As you've kind of navigated your career path, what have those certifications meant to you?
So, to be honest, it basically shows it shows on paper that you have a skill, right? And you have a certain level of expertise that you can use for a particular organization. And for me, I don't lead with it, but if you can communicate your value in a way where the individual that you're speaking to or the organization can use that, and you happen to have those letters behind your name, it's just more like a value add, right? Because I don't believe anyone says, oh, you have an MBA, you have a PMP, you have a Lean Six Sigma, we want you. No, they want to know who you are first, how you applied those skills first, how successful you were in applying those skills, and that perhaps you are somewhat trained, you're certified. So it's great to have them, but it's not the end all be all. It's actually part of the total package that you bring to the table. Because again, everyone with letters behind their name, so to speak, not necessarily means they have a certain level of competency along with that. It just means that they were school trained. So there's always a difference between application and theory, right? So in theory, I have the knowledge. Application, maybe not so much. So that's where I have to use my experience, tell my story, show, use that, use the opportunity to say, this was the task, this is what my actions were, and this were the results. And because of me, I did that. And by the way, I am school trained.
Oh man, I love you getting that STAR technique in, right? Situation, task, action, result.
Yeah.
Our poll question just came up, so I'm going to let the audience kind of dig into that. But Uwe, I'd like to extend the question to you, but with a different slant, right? You're in education. So you understand traditional education and what it brings to the table as far as someone's career is involved or concerned. But how about some of the outside certifications and trainings that people are getting kind of off campus to add to their marketability? How do you feel about that? And is there a particular direction or a supplemental kind of idea or frame of thought that you believe makes sense?
Absolutely. I agree with Rob. I think education, degrees, certifications are really door openers, especially for people who look like us. That's the reality, right? So we show up, I think, with our background, our experiences, and ready to tell our story. But many times before we have an opportunity to tell that story, the door might be a little bit closed, might be a little bit jammed, right? And so those credentials precede us at times and crack that door open so we can put our foot in and then have a different kind of conversation. So I think right now we are rethinking both in higher ed and well beyond what credentials really mean, right? While that conversation happens, anytime we have an opportunity to learn, whether it's within classroom walls with a formal degree or beyond with a certification, a conversation, I think you learn from, speaking to individuals who walk the path that you try to walk. So in my estimation, every single space you walk into is a classroom. And so you want to learn as much as you can. And then to Rob's point, it's not just a matter of collecting degrees and being able to have letters behind your name, but it's the application and the behavior with which you navigate. Sometimes we forget and think that just by having these letters behind our names, they're going to promote us and move us along a pathway. The reality is, our behavior is just as important, if not more important at times, than whatever credentials we may have in our backpack. So in my mind, the best possible opportunity for us is to complement who we are in our story with the degrees, and then really ensure that our behavior reflects that we're the right person for the role.
I love it. I'm looking at the polling question, and I'm going to ask the audience to continue to kind of shoot questions through the Q&A in the chat. In the polling question, what they were asked is, what level of your career are you currently in? So overwhelmingly, 55% reported professional technical level, but people came in. We have mid-managers, senior level managers, entrepreneurs, all on the call today. So that's exciting to me, because we have people kind of navigating their career journeys at all different phases. But I think there are some things that are extremely important no matter what phase you're in. So Rob, you spoke to this as you were closing out, but it's about having a strategy, not being finished, right? Not feeling that you've reached the apex. Like, listen, I have a strategy to continue to move forward. And some of that's about helping others, right? So Uva spoke about seeking out mentors and things of that nature. How's that work in your position as a director? How do you kind of lean back in and help other people through?
So yeah, Ken, it's almost second nature, and I have to credit my service in the military for that, because it's a highly mentorship culture and sponsorship culture. So I took those. I had great mentors coming up, and I attribute much of my success to the guidance I received from those mentors. And again, the give back is real when it comes to me. Anytime someone reaches out to me and wants some type of support, some types of advice or mentorship, I stop what I'm doing in order to do that, because we have to be there for one another. And from an internal perspective in my organization, we have many different types of mentorship programs where, I actually lead and or support. But again, when someone reaches out and says, hey, Rob, I'm having this meeting with the senior partners, can you help me understand how to best, show up with my best presence and the like, and give them some performance for feedback and that nature. That's important to me. But on the external side is what I really do truly enjoy. So you mentioned earlier, coming back to Harlem, right? It's always been a beacon for me to always come back to Harlem and help the individuals that, I grew up with, or the people that grew up in the same area that I grew up, because I think it's very important to me. But in additionally too, talking to, teenagers who are trying to make those particular transition, talking to veterans who have no idea, similar to me, no idea what to do next. There's a lot of different pockets of populations out there who just don't know what to do, and they don't know where to go and seek information. So however they find me, I stop what I'm doing, and I make sure that I provide, either I provide the advice, or I connect it to someone that can give them better advice than me, because I don't have all the answers. I do have my opinion. I have my experience to share, but at the end of the day, we all can be that sounding board, that initial mentor, initial guidance provider for individuals, because again, we have to be there for each other, regardless whether or not you're on the same team. Because I think, especially these days, without having this open dialogue and open connection, and being able to help someone out of the blue, I think is first of all, it feeds my soul, right? Okay. So I want to make sure that, I'm fed, right? So it feeds my soul to help others. But another thing too is, by helping others, you have to pay it forward. So, that's my 2 cents on how mentorship works with me, both internal to my organization as well as external.
I think there's a piece of it that's a give and receive piece as well. So probably through some of that work, you've received some exposure as well. Not that that was the original goal, but it just happens through osmosis, right?
Absolutely. And you have to put yourself out there, right? So if you want to be a change agent, you want to be a catalyst for change, you want to be the change you want to see, you have the courage and confidence to put yourself out there. And it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen just with the flick of a switch, so to speak. It comes over years and years of you understanding your journey, where you could have went left instead of right, or right versus left. But more importantly, if people reach out to you, you have an obligation. I mean, if you are on any type of platform and you open up to, to the dialogue, there's some of the obligation there to continue down that conversation and provide some level of support. Again, you can't help everyone, and I'm not trying to save the world, but if we connect and you have a question, I have an answer.
Gotcha. So we have another polling question now. That's, what are you working towards achieving at this career level? So please, everybody that's on the actual DCSS, please answer the polling question. Uva, all right, so this is so innate to you, this whole leveling up conversation. And here's why I mentioned that. you spent some time, so you spent some time at En-ROADS, and they do some great things for students and young professionals, very much in line with the National Urban League and the things they do for that population as well, and the Urban League affiliates. I actually met you at a UL affiliate in Philly, and I think you were there on a mission, not with En-ROADS, but just helping people kind of level up. That was the goal. So you were at En-ROADS, you were helping people, but then you had to find time to help yourself. Tell me about that process for you on both sides.
Sure. So one, I would say that the idea of mentorship for me is less option, more requirement. That's just a part of, I think, work that we are required to do, especially when we've had the benefit of people pouring into us. So I truly have been nothing but poured into, fed into. I am a first generation college student. First generation careers. And so what that means is in my nuclear family, I was the first to get a degree and I was the first to go into a corporate environment, right? And so what that meant was my parents, for as brilliant as they were, and they still are, they simply didn't have the business acumen, the experience that could really support my own growth and my own development in my career. What that meant is the village had to step in a different way. And so individuals, especially teachers in high school, stepped in and filled the gap where my parents couldn't. Now, what my parents were able to do was to instill the values, the work ethic, right? The love, quite frankly, that I needed to, I think, round out a full, good human being. So all of that, I think, became a part of who I am and what I've carried. What I recognized over time was I wanted to continue to do that work, and En-ROADS was one of the most beautiful spaces that allowed me to pour into young minds who were as eager and as hungry as every single person who's probably with us today, right? But while I did that, I recognized that I didn't want to have a lid on me. I didn't want to have a lid on what I could do or needed to do. And so for as much as I loved that particular opportunity, I wanted to grow. And so I think what I did at the time was to use the same lessons that I poured into my students around what I wanted to do with my life, where I saw myself, making sure that I was reaching out to my network and leveraging it. The same lessons that I was teaching my students, I was starting to apply to myself. And so with that, I started to look for opportunities that would allow me the chance to continue with my growth. And that's, quite frankly, all I had to do was desire it, dream it, and then set a goal forward and follow it. And the rest just kind of fell into place. It fell into place for me. I have to be honest. Part of that had to do with being resilient, right? When you send out those job applications, when you fill them out online, you know, every time you get a no, I know your heart hurts and you get discouraged. I've been there. When you go to that interview and you're ready to go and you think I am the best candidate and you don't get that call back, it hurts. It weighs on you and it starts to chip away at your self-confidence and the things that people have built in you already. What I would say is I've been there. I think most of us, Rob, you've probably been there as well. And so that's where the resilience comes in. That's where my parents' training came in. That's where the you are here to stay and failure is not an option. That kind of DNA that's in me kind of stepped in and stepped up and allowed me to keep pushing. I was able to get the next job. And every single time I walked into a role, for me, there were no boundaries around the work that I needed to do. I always imagined what the next step needed to be. I always figured out that there was something bigger that I needed to accomplish and achieve. And I walked that way in my workplace. So that line we all have in our job descriptions with other duties as assigned, for me, that was a challenge. What are those other duties that I want to imagine and recognize? One of the things that I want to stress is recognizing that when you're in a role, what's critical is that you perform what you've been hired to do. Sometimes we get a little bit sidetracked, and so we start imagining things ahead of time and start focusing on the things we love rather than the job that we were assigned to do. Do the work you were asked to do it in a stellar way, do it the best way you possibly can, while you also imagine what the future ought to be and network and do the best you can to position yourself for that next step. So that's what I've always done. It's worked out for me, but it's not magic. It's not easy. It requires a lot of effort, a lot of network, and a lot of strategy. There is a strategy within career development and career advancement. And I think it begins with believing that you really do belong wherever your feet are.
Wow, exceptional.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, sure.
So, thank you for sharing that, Uwe. And you brought something to mind, from a tactical perspective in your organization, the concept of entrepreneurship is one way where you can get some presence, you get your name out there, and more importantly, have impact outside of your normal role. So the idea of entrepreneurship is like, what is wrong within your organization that you can help solve for, that maybe not be under your description within your specific team or your hierarchy, right? There are always opportunities within your organization to fix a problem, because no organization is perfect. So this idea of entrepreneurship, where you're solving problems for the business that's outside of your normal day-to-day, is a way that you can get notoriety within your firm, get noticed by people who will sponsor you, and then that conversation, of course, you have to perform, and to Uwe's point, you have to do the job they brought you on to do as well. But if you kind of figure out a way to manage that particular process and solve problems, trust me, you'll get known. And when it comes for performance review time, you can add that on too. So you've done your job that they asked you to a high level, plus you solved this problem that was outside of your normal scope. And I think that will definitely set you up for success in the future in your organization, as well as provide you exposure to new skill sets that perhaps you don't get to do within your normal day-to-day job.
Wow, excellent. Just real quick, so you guys are aware of the results of the polling questions as you frame your answers. People are looking for a promotion and a raise. So overwhelmingly, people are looking for a promotion and a raise. Rob, I wanna position this question to you. It's from Ms. Henton, and basically she wants someone to speak on how you made the decision to search and eventually navigate senior level positions. Example, currently she's interviewing for director level roles, and she's not done so previously. Any advice?
Is this internal or external to our current organization?
Let's go on both sides of the fence.
So the internal, I would say, if you're trying to seek an executive director role, like what business case are you presenting that says that the company should promote you, right? So what is your book of business, so to speak, within the organization that you can stand on that says that I am ready for executive director work, as well as how are you positioning yourself for these projects that are, again, maybe outside of your normal day-to-day, that is of that caliber. In addition, who is sponsoring and advocating for you to be able to fit in that particular role within that organization? Because again, to Uwe's point, a lot of people pour some things into you, and a lot of individuals, are supporting you. However, the payback is, what are you doing for the organization, for that individual, that provides them the courage and confidence to give you that political currency, as Carla Harris always talks about.
Yeah.
And external, it's essentially how you position yourself from your resume, and again, as Uwe mentioned before, how you got that foot in the door, and then share your story, share your value, share how you are ready at that moment and to be that executive director position, whatever case may be, to understand truly that when you get there, you are able to deliver, okay? What are the actions that you've done previously with the qualified and quantitative results that they will find valuable in order for them to bring you on? If you do not understand their business model, how they make money, how their operations are, and be able to connect things that you have done as well as the skill sets that you have in order to solve those problems in that new organization, they're not going to give you a second look. However, with the more information you have, and this is where that networking is really important, how can you get that intelligence within that particular firm to be tactical in having those conversations about, I understand that project X is this, I want to lead this, but here is the experience that I've had that communicates that I'm able to do that plus excel within that particular role. So I hope that kind of frames out in a very short period of time of how you can do that both internally and externally.
Sure, definitely. Thank you so very much. Uwe, I'm coming your way. Erica asked the question, how do you, and I want you to look at this in the new normal with people doing remote working. And I know that can be challenging, but I think I'm positive you're equipped to answer it in that lens. How do you suggest we avoid racial tokenism and status quo assimilation once you get to mid and senior level management or leadership roles?
How much time do we have?
Not a lot.
Yeah, so what I would say is whether it's a virtual environment or face-to-face in pre-COVID, right, what we would consider traditional interactions, the reality is tokenism is going to show itself in organizations where the diversity isn't there, where the voice isn't there, right? And so what we need to consider is the environment. Culture is critical. Culture is critical. Organizational culture is critical. And so whether we're just coming into an organization or we've navigated it for some time, it's really important that we sit back and read the culture. You will know whether an organization is really committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion by the very virtue of who sits at the top. That is the best possible, I think, reflection of the organization's values. When you look at governance, when you look at your executive team, that will let you know where diversity stands in terms of their priority level. And so what that means is you have to read where you are and understand how to navigate. And if you are put in positions that ask you to show up just as a body, but not necessarily having a voice, not necessarily having agency, not necessarily having influence, you know that there's a disconnect between where you have been positioned, what you've been called to do, and how you're actually looked at or how you're valued, right? So the disconnect, I think, is clear when you are asked to show up, but not necessarily to use your voice. And I think a more concrete way of saying that is if you are the person of color, especially, or whatever your difference is, right? Sometimes it's our gender, sometimes it's our sexual orientation, whatever that difference might be. If you notice that you are called for the pictures, the photo ops, the images, the presentation of diversity, but when the conversations that really matter happen, you don't have a seat at the table. And there are various tables, but if you're not having an active voice at tables where the conversation will actually have an impact, then I think that gives you an idea of whether or not you have been called to produce and to have agency, or if you have been tokenized. So that would be the best way to, I think, begin to look at that work. And if you do feel that you have been tokenized, then I think the hard work is to be clear about whether or not this is an organization where that can be addressed. And sometimes it can be. Sometimes, right, the right conversation can lead to a shift in how individuals or an organization works. And other times you may recognize, you may learn that this is an organization that is comfortable in that space. And then you have a decision to make. Today, especially, we're having some really interesting conversations about this diversity, this idea of inclusion and culture, right? And so what I would say is perk up your ears, listen up, listen out, use your voice when you can, take all of that information and then make a decision that really fits who you are and what your goals are.
And that's beautiful, wonderful. I can't wait I'm locked into these questions. We have so many questions and I'm locked in. So sometimes I'm reading the questions while you're speaking, but okay. I can't wait to go back on YouTube to the Urban League Jobs Network YouTube channel to watch this episode rerun and all the episodes for that matter. Listen, Rob, I'm coming to you with this one and you'll see when I ask you the question why I'm coming to you. Cheyenne says she's been working in nonprofit for a few years, but she's looking to pivot her career to management consulting. She's in school now to get an MA in organizational management and she's looking to get certified in project management. How can I market myself to get my foot in the door in consulting? I think you were set up for this one, my friend.
So thank you for that. Yes. So first of all, congratulations on working towards your master's. That's important. As well as getting your project management certification. I would say consulting is a very professional service, and consulting is somewhat unique in that it depends upon what else you bring to the table. So it's not only about the skills, but primarily in consulting, they're also concerned about your network and, more importantly, the connections you have in order to bring in business, right? So one is, do a really good assessment of what you can bring to the table, because at the end of the day, when you get into that organization, you're going to have to be a hunter. You have to find work to do in organizations that need your consultancy, right? So, you know, how are you set up now, you know, before you even finish out your degrees? And if you're not set up, that you have a great connection and a great network that could be potentially lucrative as a consultant, what are you doing in order to build out that network? Because again, it's not about just having the job. It's not about having the credentials. It's also about, you know, it was about your behaviors and your connections and your relationships. Because consultancy is all about relationships. In addition, you know, you also have to look at, you know, because you're starting out, think about all the consultancy you actually done within that nonprofit. I'm sure within your current role, you can connect consultancy-like work. You may not call it consultancy, but I'm sure if you're looking out for, you know, fixing an issue within the organization, that is consulting. You know, how do you gain a greater sense or how are you leveraging what you know in order to be a better fundraiser for the organization? That is consultancy. So again, as you start to build out your skill set and put it on a resume, how are you connecting your current skills and your current job opportunity into and translate it into consultancy-like positions and or skill set? And then lastly, really, you know, looking at the firms that you're attempting to go into, like what are their onboarding procedures to bring in new consultants, right? How are they going to, you have to understand their culture as well, because again, you might be brought into an organization and a consultant organization that just may, again, just give you, you know, a goal for the year, and you have to figure out how to make that, right? Or there'll be some that can really do a good job of coaching you, developing you as a consultant and moving forward. I would tell you that it's, you know, as you get better and as you are more successful as a consultant, you know, it gets a lot easier, but those first 2-3 years are going to be very difficult because you're establishing your name as a thought leader in a particular space. You're establishing your network, and more importantly, you establish your relationships that won't immediately turn into revenue, and you must be able to play the long game. So, you know, in the short amount of time, I think those are good first 3 steps. But again, you probably have many of the skill sets that you do day to day that relate to consulting work. You have to be able to translate that and present yourself as ready to be a consultant even before you finish out your training within your schooling and your certification.
Great, thank you so very much. We have a question from William, and we'll just keep bouncing back and forth, but you know, if you want to chime in, go ahead and chime in. But Uva, what happens when you come in a position with the skill sets and ideas, but your employer becomes intimidated by your knowledge, experience, and networks?
It's a great question. I think what we have to consider is how we are presenting. And so here's the reality. There may be cases, there will absolutely be cases where people may have some challenges with who you are for whatever the reasons might be. And so you can't control what other people do. What you are in full control of is how you manage your own career navigation. And so I think there's always opportunity for some self-reflection. And I always begin with, let me consider what I might be doing or how I might need to reframe or rethink my own approach to make sure that I'm getting the results I want. That reflection is critical because you want to make sure that you are approaching things in the best way. And so if there are things that you need to do a little bit differently, you do, right? You work hard on developing whatever that skill might need to be. At other times, you might recognize after a whole lot of self-reflection that it's not you, it's the manager, or it's the environment. And so in situations like that, you have to decide how you want to move forward. I think a really underutilized skill is just communicating, right? Now, what happens in situations like the one you just mentioned, Ken, is we get emotional, right? If I feel that I am trying my best, I'm doing a good job, and it's my manager or someone else who's getting in the way, the emotion sometimes gets ahead of us, and we have a difficult time articulating what the challenge is. I would say very concretely, write down what you believe the issues are, and so then ask for time, a very isolated time with your manager or whomever that person might be, and engage in an intentionally productive conversation where you can say, these are the things that I'm trying to work toward. I believe there is a disconnect or a challenge with perhaps how I am approaching or how my approach is being received. I'd like some direct feedback about how I might be able to improve in this space. And so what you're doing is you're you're putting a pin on the emotion and you're engaging that person in a very objective conversation about what they perceive the issue might be, which gives you a chance to reflect and respond or articulate what you're really trying to do. And it also gives you feedback to go back to the drawing board and figure out if there are things you might need to do differently. I think that when you have to consider the power dynamics. If you're talking about your manager and that's a person who you believe feels intimidated, then your job is to figure out how to work through the situation, right? You can't throw up your hands. You can't simply say you're at fault. You have to figure out how you're going to use strategy to break through that wall. And strategy, in my mind, always begins with communication, but we have to be able to channel our emotion, which is hard. So I will end this part by saying, go to a mentor, a sponsor, or someone whose wisdom you trust and ask them, one, for direct feedback so that you can, beyond the self-reflection, you can also learn how you're coming across. And if this has little to do with you or nothing to do with you, then you're going to have to build a strategy about how to break through and work around a situation that is beyond your control. You can't control other people's actions or emotions, but you can certainly control your own. And I think that's where the work begins.
No, but I love it. That's a great segue. You know, you're speaking about power dynamics, right? Mentorship, communication, strategy. Shelly wants to know, what is the best way to locate a mentor? And if you need to know, if you know that you need one. So what's the best way to locate a mentor when you know you need one?
Is that to me, Ken?
Come on in.
All right, so, you know, there's many different ways that you can, you know, identify a mentor. One of the easiest ways to understand your current network that you have, because I would imagine that everyone knows somebody that, if you talk about 6 degrees of separation, someone knows someone that can help you, you know, find out whatever advice you're looking for. So that's an easy, you know, internal, you know, with your local circle. So again, you know, however you leverage the people that you know now. And ask them, you know, okay, do you know someone who has specific skill area in X, and figure out who it is you can talk to. LinkedIn is a great place to start because people are advertising what they do and what they do well. And if you're not a strategic user of LinkedIn, not just, you know, having, you know, your name up there and maybe a somewhat questionable LinkedIn photo and maybe not a full description of what it is that you do or don't do, you know, if you're using LinkedIn appropriately, you would absolutely find individuals who can help you. Now, how you reach out to them is also a tactical, strategic move, right? So, you know, they have the levels of sponsorship, levels of connections 1, 2, and 3. And again, that's probably a class for another session. But if you look at how to effectively use LinkedIn in order to identify people who are in the space that you are seeking mentorship, that's also a great way to do that. In addition, in your current organization, you know, there's plenty of leaders, I'm sure, who are looking to give back but just don't have the time to seek it. So you're helping them kind of meet that particular goal that they have, because I would imagine that most organizations have some sort of mentorship culture, some sort of mentorship program. And if you're not leveraging that within your own organization, you know, I think that is also a miss. But I want to also answer this question differently, Ken, because just like Fortune 500 companies have boards, who is your board, right? So when we talk about like who is your board that tells, you know, Rob Barea, you know, and give them different perspectives, a board of directors, so to speak. And because I have a board of directors, I'm sure Uwe, you have them as well, because you spoke about mentorship earlier. I have a board of directors, so when I have a specific problem, I have a specific person that I'm already that I already have a connection with, and they have the advice for me. And again, it's not just having just one mentor; it's having a full array, a diverse set of mentors, because everyone's going to give you the same level of input and also same type of value and skill set as they share. And the last thing I'll say about mentorship, when you're seeking a mentor, look for the anti-you. And what I mean by that is, if you're seeking information from someone who has the same skill set as you, the same experiences as you, the same, you know, desires as you, you're going to get the same information that you already have. If you get the anti-you, right, and find that individual, that person will give those skills that you're actually seeking to gain. So again, mentorship, look for the anti-you, leverage your initial, your current circle, leverage your mentorship programs with the organization, and effectively and strategically use LinkedIn in order to find the right person that's going to help you get to that next level.
Hey, Rob, while you're here, tell us the difference between a sponsor and a mentor.
I add coach to that too, if you don't mind, right? So I forgot which TED Talk I saw, but it's real simple. A coach talks to you, a mentor talks with you, a sponsor talks for you. I'll say that again. A coach talks with you, talks to you, a mentor talks with you, and a sponsor talks for you. So the difference between a mentor and a sponsor primarily is a sponsor will advocate for you when you're not around. They'll speak on your behalf. They'll put your name in the hat when you didn't even know that your name, there was a hat for you to put in. A mentor really converses with you and guides you and makes sure that, you know, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, you're at least on the path. It's a mutually beneficial relationship because, again, you're sharing information and you're also building each other up. But a sponsor is actually they have political clout in your organization. They have what Carla Harris refers to political currency, which I always love. Anything that Carla Harris does, you know, and I listen intently. They use their political currency based upon the performance that you have already shown or the potential that you can do, and they use it on your behalf in order for you to get forward and move forward ahead. So when we talk about sponsorship, especially as it pertains to diversity and inclusion, we always have people advocate, especially for underrepresented groups, because as you know, they might not have the same level of advocacy for the more of the in-group.
All right, great, excellent. Uva, real quick, can you answer this question? This is from Annie. What is your best professional advice for people with disabilities in their job search, including hidden disabilities?
Absolutely, and great question. I think what's important with jobs to begin with is that you're always look at the job you currently have and the job you're looking to have, right? The job that you want to be promoted, whether that's internal or external, and figure out what the skill set is in both. What do you have and what do you need for that next role? And then map it, right? You need to be able to connect the dots between who you are and what you do and what you're aspiring to. Wherever there might be gaps, you want to fill in those gaps. I think that whether you have physical disabilities or visible disabilities or not, what you need to focus on is what you bring to the table, right? I believe that you perform, you show up, ready to speak about your competencies, ready to speak about what the job requires and how you will be able to fulfill those requirements. In an ideal situation, in an organization that's being fair, an organization that is equitable, what they need to look at, and based on law, what they should be looking at is your ability to perform the work. So your job is not to focus on speaking to them about any perceived deficits you believe they think you may have, but to really lift up your proficiency, to lift up the job you can do and have done, and to, again, connect the dots between what you have done or are currently doing and what the job requires. That's really your focus. Anything outside of that, in my mind, becomes a legal constraint and an issue. And that's not to say that it's not going to happen. We know it's going to happen. But again, I go back to you have to focus on the things that you can control. And what you can control is to create a story of your capacity, your capability, your work ethic, and what you will bring to the table. That's your job. Once you've done that, then you do have to sit back and let your work speak for itself. So that's how I would begin. And always look at a company's vision, its mission, its value statement, right? Because they're a good indication of the things they value. And if you go into a website, a company's website, even if you work within it, and you're not seeing that diversity and there isn't a focus on inclusion, that may give you some ideas around some of the challenges they have, but they ought to live up to who you are. Your job is not to focus on what may be missing or how different you may be. Your job is to show them that you can do the job.
Great. This is a straight leveling up question. This is what this is all about. So Lloyd reports, he said he's having discussions with a company that is looking to create new roles required to move their business forward. He has the skills in a couple areas where they have a need. He has a slight preference for one area. How does he communicate that without eliminating chances in other areas? So it's strategy, right?
It's always strategy. One of the things we have to be clear about is the goal of any role is to fulfill the goal of the role, right? And so whether we lean toward a part of the job, we all do that. You have a job description, and at the end of the day, our heart kind of speaks to a certain part of the job more than others. There are areas that just interest us more and, you know, we get more passionate about, but our job is to fulfill the job holistically, right? Whatever the role is, our job is to fulfill it holistically. And so while you may be predisposed, or you have a leaning toward a certain part of it, you have to be able to do every single part of it. Now, there may be areas where you soar a little bit more, where you're a little bit better, and that's okay. But I would say you have to focus on the job in a very holistic sense. That's the best advice I think I would give. And then if there are areas where you have some challenges, figure out a way to complement those or to fill those gaps with the experience that you need. A manager, at the end of the day, you need to be able to sit in front of your manager and know that for every box there is for the job responsibilities you haven't just checked them, you have fulfilled them as well as you can. And in as many cases as you can, you've actually exceeded that goal as well.
And if I can add to that, great advice, Uva. You know, one tactical measure you can do too is help solving the problem before you assign the project, right? So, you know, if you can display before they even go into that, you know, you have already thought about the problem, you have a first 90 days what you would do, you know, you don't have to go into detail. I mean, you have to show that, one, that you're interested, and two, that you understand that project and how to be successful in achieving the goals of that project and meeting that scope. So if you have a preference for one or the other, I would say, you know, put your thoughts down. If I was given this role, I would do this in the first 90 days. I would do this in the first 6 months. That way you can show that you are thoughtful and deliberate about how to approach the job. And probably, you know, yes, it's exposing that you want one over the other, but if that's what you really want, you have to stake a claim in there. And the way to do that is to share that I want this job, and by the way, I can do this job, and this is what I already thought about. Now, mind you, I would definitely include some individuals in that process to make sure that you have the full view, because the worst thing you can do is offer it and you are totally blind to maybe some of the challenges of the role. But that also speaks to that established network that you already have, as well as the skill sets that you already have in order to get the goal, which is to get that preferred role.
You know, this is kind of a vague question, but I think it can be answered accordingly. How should I handle internal employment roadblocks? That could mean so much stuff, but just in general, if you kind of gave a blanket statement about that, what would you suggest, Uva?
It is a big question. I'll try to give a brief answer. I think you have to be clear about what the challenge really is. And a lot of times we tell ourselves stories about what we think is happening without validating what's actually happening. So internal roadblocks, at the end of the day, you're still trying to get to an end result. And so the question that I would always ask myself is there someone I trust who might be able to sit with me and think about the problem and be objective with their answers? Because again, we all have our own lens and we have a way of looking at the world, and certainly the workplace is no different. So I would say no matter what the issue is, make sure that you're trying to look at it as objectively as you can, and that you have a thought partner. We all need a thought partner in the workplace. And so hopefully there's a colleague you trust. I usually say mentors. Find someone who can guide you. Share that problem with them and then take in the information. Listen, I always say 2 ears, 1 mouth. That's because we ought to listen more than we speak. And so if you can share that problem with your mentor or with a trusted colleague, whoever your thought partner is, and then listen to their answer and then strategize, create a strategy to get around that problem. Sometimes you have to get through that problem, right? But you don't want to go at it alone. Always, always, always seek the guidance of someone whose wisdom you trust, so that you are walking lockstep with someone who can support you and get into that finish line.
You know, such a robust conversation today. So many great questions from the audience. I want to give you guys a hand. You guys were great today. Uva, really trying times that we're experiencing right now in our world. And I know for a fact, because I've seen you do this, I know you are proficient and skilled in spoken word and in poetry. Any closing remarks that you'd like to give with us today before I sign off?
Absolutely. I wrote something for us today. It's called Interview on Juneteenth. And so hopefully for those of you getting ready for that first interview or that next interview, this is helpful. We get nervous when we walk into that interview, right? So when we walk in, all dressed in Blackness, all dressed in fitted, tailored suits and well-pressed, well-starched shirts, designer heels or shoes that hold our elbow grease and dreams and stories untold, we are not alone. When we walk in all dressed in Blackness, hair freshly cut, wigged, well-weaved, permed, twisted or bald, our locks thick with historic memory, our scalp neatly parted in zigzag patterns that once held slave to freedom keys down south to up north, traveled to Canadian borders, road maps, directions knitted and etched between box braids and well-oiled plaits. Our fingertips, majestic pens, our ancestors authored liberation hymns in intricate updo styles that seemed so pretty, just so pretty, but were really rebellion songs, freedom songs, protest songs. We still hear in Minneapolis and London, Atlanta and Panama, Philly and Seattle and New York. Words now etched and memorialized on DC streets, Black Lives Matter. When we walk in all dressed in Blackness, walk into boardrooms, briefcase or padfolio in hand, resumes not quite fluent in our story, how do you contain centuries of competency gained through generational lessons learned at our mother's knees? The stories that lay at our fathers' feet, stories told, our secrets kept each day, each step we walk through, cloaked in Black skin, no matter how blue, Black, or light the hue. We remember cotton fields in Caribbean, Latin, and North American fields. We picked up lessons, language foreign to us, made it our own. Por eso es que yo hablo español. We learned how to navigate the world while Black. So when they ask you for this role, remember, when you can't find your breath to speak, articulate your story, remember breath arrested by knees bent over necks, and George and Ahmad and Sandra and Brianna's names, they might feel like cinder blocks on your chest, but let them anchor you, let them lift you. Instead, when we walk in all dressed in Blackness, when they ask you, tell me about yourself, you might think, how do I not implode? How do I smile and not lose my composure when feet ache from protests and vocal cords are sore from screaming and chanting and bellowing that our lives matter? When we walk in all dressed in Blackness, just know that you are bilingual, fluent in the strategy of survival, bicultural, carrying disparate worlds on squared shoulders, fitted tailored suits and well-pressed, well-starched shirts, designer heels or shoes that hold our elbow grease, and dreams and stories untold. You are not alone when we walk in.
Oh, man, that's amazing. Uber Coles, ladies and gentlemen, Rob Barea, this is the one. This is exactly what I wanted to do today. Thank you both so very much for just being amazing guests. Thank you so very much to Wanda Jackson, Beverly Felix, and the rest of the NUL team for letting us do what we do, right? It's amazing. Very, very much amazing. And thank you to all the people that took the time out to spend this time with us today to level up in their careers. Connect with Rob and Uva on LinkedIn. I think Fevi dropped both of your links into the chat. So hopefully you'll see people circle back to you guys. We're going to do it again on June 8th. And on June 8th, we'll do Black Men in the Workforce, right? I'm sorry, July 8th. I apologize. We'll do Black Men in the Workforce with a gentleman named Mark Hall. Mark Hall also will check in with me tomorrow. East Coast Executives presents the Future of Work Conversation, Black Male Edition, based on the McKinsey & Company study on the future of work. This is what we do. Mark Hall, Keyshawn Holloway, Curtis Jacobs, Terrence Southern. Please hit the link. Join us tomorrow for another conversation about the future of work for Black men. Uva, Rob, UL team, man, this was incredible. Thank you so very much for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'll see everybody back July 8th with Mark Hall. Google contributor. I'm sorry, Google employee, Forbes contributor. It's going to be a great session about work in the workplace for Black men. Thank you.